Hey everyone, tonight we're heading somewhere way out past the edges of what even counts as space. Picture this, 2:47 a.m., fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The kind of cold that sticks to your bones. And I'm sitting in a half-abandoned observatory outside Flagstaff, Arizona, slurping instant ramen out of a thermos lid because I forgot to bring a bowl. Then the signal came. You ever hear something that doesn't sound scary at first but makes your stomach twist like it knows something your brain doesn't? That's what this was. A subtle rhythm, 3 pulses. Then a long pause. Then 5 shorter ones. At first, I figured it was some satellite bouncing noise or maybe an old Russian probe having a cosmic hiccup. But then it repeated, exactly, with atomic precision, every single time. Not random, not noise, this was deliberate. You might not survive this story the same way you entered it. So before you feel like the mystery needs to be solved right away, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. And hey, post your location and what time it is for you right now. I want to know who's staying up with me tonight. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soft noise. And let's get started on tonight's mystery. I didn't log the signal right away. That's mistake number 1. I just stared at it. This simple beat of code that didn't belong. You'd be surprised how easy it is to ignore something world-shaking when it shows up at the wrong time. The universe doesn't really care about your schedule. That's old observatory wisdom for you. The feed was coming through our dish array, 3 linked telescopes we used mostly for cataloging boring local galactic drift. Nothing flashy, no alien hunting. This wasn't SETI, but the signal wasn't bouncing off our atmosphere, it was originating way beyond it. I checked with national satellites, nothing. No reflections, no known source. And when I triangulated, that's when my coffee went cold in my hand. It was coming from the general area of a dwarf galaxy called UGC 4722. A lopsided, struggling little thing in the Lynx constellation. It wasn't famous or flashy, but that night, it was the loudest thing in the void. I called in my colleague Marcus. He's the kind of guy who wears hiking boots to bed. Probably, never not ready for something ridiculous. He brought his dog-eared copy of Mathematics of the Deep Universe and a portable whiteboard because of course he did. He heard the signal, ran the numbers, and his face turned pale. That's a prime number chain. He said, it's organized. Someone's talking. He looked at me, or something is. We logged it and submitted a data burst to the International Cosmic Signal Registry. Just protocol, but we got no pingback. No acknowledgement, radio silence. Off topic, but did you know bees can recognize human faces? Like, not just shapes, actual facial identity. They've got tiny little brains and still manage facial recognition. Why do I bring that up? You'll see, but trust me, once you realize what's watching you, it changes how you see faces. All of them. The signal repeated again at 4:22 a.m. same cadence. But this time it ended with a final, strange pulse. A harmonic echo that didn't fit anything I'd seen before. Marcus called it a gravitational smear. He was smiling when he said it, but not in a good way. Then the lights in the lab flickered. That building had backup power on top of backup power. We'd survived 2 Arizona monsoons and a solar flare without blinking. That night, the generators hiccuped. There's an academic debate that goes like this. If we ever make contact with something not from Earth, will it recognize us as intelligent life? Or will it see us like we see ants? Interesting. Maybe useful, but ultimately beneath notice. That's the question that haunted me as I sat staring at the screen. Something had found us, and it was knocking. Around sunrise, the signal stopped, like a curtain being pulled shut. I went outside. The desert was quiet, like it always is, but the stars were gone. Just swallowed up by a thin veil of cloud that hadn't been in any forecast. Even the air felt wrong. Thin, metallic. Marcus leaned over and whispered something I've never forgotten. If something out there is watching, he said, I think it just realized we looked back. We stayed silent the rest of the morning. Running diagnostics. Everything checked out. Except the fear. That stayed. Marcus and I didn't sleep. Not because we didn't want to, trust me. After a 16-hour shift in a freezing observatory, a nap sounded heavenly, but because our brains wouldn't shut off. The signal had wormed its way into our thoughts. Like a catchy tune you hate but can't stop humming. Only this wasn't a song. It was a message, one that knew how to wait. Around noon, after we split a half-warmed burrito and a single caffeine tablet, don't judge, it works. We started analyzing the numerical pulses more closely. Marcus was drawing on his whiteboard like a man possessed, layering prime number groupings with Fibonacci spirals and trigonometric functions, muttering something about recursive collapse patterns. I was feeding the signal through every algorithm I could think of, looking for symmetry, compression points, anything that hinted at intelligence. That's when we saw it. Hidden inside the repeating pulses was a numerical pattern we hadn't noticed before. It wasn't random, it was an equation, and not just any equation, a mathematical structure so clean, so impossibly perfect, that it felt wrong. Imagine this. You're hiking through a forest and find a rock carved into a perfect sphere with nanometer precision. It's beautiful, but you know, instinctively, that no wind, no rain, no natural force made it. That's what this equation felt like. Something made it on purpose. The structure was recursive, yet non-fractal. It described something that didn't exist in classical physics. According to Marcus, who'd gone full mad scientist by this point, it looked like an energy curve for a theoretical object that could flatten curvature in space-time without exerting force. You know what that means? No, seriously, I didn't either, but Marcus explained, if this is right, then whatever wrote this knows how to fold space without energy cost. That's impossible, and just like that, we weren't dealing with a message. We were dealing with knowledge. And that's where it gets scary. Old research tradition says, the more elegant an equation is, the more dangerous it becomes when misunderstood. Like the guy who figured out a cleaner fission formula in 1938 and immediately had a breakdown. We were towing into that territory now. But here's the kicker. We checked the position of UGC 4722 again, the origin point. And it was gone. Not fuzzy resolution, gone. Not dust cloud interference, gone. Just not there, like someone had cut it out of the sky with cosmic scissors. That dwarf galaxy, which had been there for thousands of years, was now missing from every telescope that had eyes on it. Even archived images glitched when we tried to pull them up, like corrupted files. One telescope in Chile tried to send us infrared data, and it came back completely black. Zero heat, zero light, as if the galaxy had never existed. I called a contact at the European Southern Observatory. He didn't say much, just 3 words, don't dig deeper. Let me pause here for a quirky detour, because your brain probably needs one. You know the blue whale's heart is the size of a golf cart. Right, big enough that a kid could crawl through its arteries. Totally unrelated to space math, but oddly comforting. There are things in our world that are massive and real, and we understand them. That was a nice thought, for about 5 seconds. Because back in our lab, the equation started changing, not randomly, progressively, like it was growing, or worse, reacting. It added a new variable we hadn't seen before, something resembling a curvature loop embedded within the original pulse. And it repeated not 3 times now, but 6 long pulses, like a new heartbeat. Marcus went pale. It's iterating, he said. It's not just broadcasting, it's learning. He tapped his pen against the board. Either someone's listening and responding, or the signal itself is alive. Now, I know how that sounds. I really do. But consider this. When we send signals into space, we don't know what form they'll be received in. Language, sound, math. What if something out there doesn't talk, it just thinks? There's an academic phrase we kept repeating. Intelligence doesn't require embodiment. Meaning, something doesn't need a brain to be smart. It could be a field, a frequency, a force. And if that force is now rewriting the equation based on our interactions, well, congratulations. You've officially shaken hands with something humanity's never even imagined. I remember standing by the lab window, watching the stars. They looked the same, twinkling, scattered, familiar, but I couldn't shake the feeling that one of them was gone. Replaced. Or maybe just watching back. Marcus stayed behind that night, refusing to go home. He wanted to observe the pattern shift in real time, which is code for, I'm not sleeping until I know we didn't open a door we can't close. I drove home, windows down, desert wind in my face, trying to feel small again, safe, but even with the engine humming, I swear I could still hear it. That signal, like it had tuned itself into the back of my skull. And when I finally crawled into bed, I dreamed about a black circle, silent, pulsing, surrounded by stars that blinked off one by one until only it remained. The next morning, Marcus didn't answer his phone. Now, that in itself wasn't unusual. He had a habit of turning it off while deep diving into a problem. But I still had a pit in my stomach, the kind of feeling you get when you see brake lights ahead of you on the freeway. And something in your body clenches before you even touch the pedal. So I drove back up to the observatory. I found him in the control room, eyes locked on the monitors, still wearing the same hoodie from the night before. He looked like he hadn't blinked in hours. Empty coffee cups formed a half moon around him. It's gone, he said without turning around. What is? He slowly pointed to the leftmost monitor. UGC 4709. Another dwarf galaxy, same quadrant. I squinted, where the catalog feed should have shown a grainy blot of starlight and dust. There was nothing, a black patch, no radio signature, no heat, no visible or ultraviolet reflection. It's just not there, Marcus whispered. Gone, like it never existed, like something's erasing history itself. I tried to play devil's advocate. Maybe it's a sensor glitch. Cosmic interference. But Marcus shook his head. I triple-checked, across 3 different systems. There's no data, not even legacy entries. It's not just vanished from now. It's been removed from then. He clicked open the old archival images from months ago, blank. He pulled up printed research papers, screenshots, even an old JPEG he saved on a USB drive. All of them returned with a 404 style data error. The images literally couldn't load, as if the universe had redacted that corner of space. Academic circles refer to this kind of theoretical event as localized cosmological censorship. It's a fringe idea, mostly used in science fiction, the notion that an entity could delete parts of the cosmos. And not just the physical matter, but the memory and record of it. Until now, we thought it was impossible. Now, I wasn't so sure. There's an old saying among astronomers, if you look into the void long enough, the void sends paperwork. It's a joke about how discovery leads to bureaucracy. But this was beyond discovery. There was no paper trail, just absence. I know this sounds ridiculous, but in that moment, I had a wild thought. What if the signal isn't coming from the missing galaxies, but what if it's what's causing them to disappear? Marcus, in his over-caffeinated state, had apparently had the same thought, and worse. What if it's a test? He said, eyes wide. What if it's trying to see what we notice? Like, removing things and seeing if we react. He leaned closer, dropping his voice like someone might be listening. I think it's mapping us. Through subtraction. I laughed. Too loud. It was nervous. Like cosmic peekaboo. Marcus didn't smile, like it wants to know if we're aware. It's funny. Humans are so obsessed with contact, with finding something out there, but we never really ask what happens if the thing we find doesn't want to be found. Or worse, if it does. Here's an off-topic fact to break your brain for a second. Octopuses have 3 hearts and blue blood. And when they're stressed, they can die of exhaustion trying to escape. Beautiful, brilliant, and fragile. We always think aliens will look like tentacled horrors. But what if the real alien is a math-based predator that operates like a surgeon, slowly removing galaxies with precision? I watched as Marcus brought up the most recent signal analysis. The pattern had shifted again. This time, the sequence ended in what looked like a pause. A long, silent space where there should have been more data. Not a glitch, an intentional absence. "It's waiting," he said. We both stared at the monitors, realizing that whatever was behind this, it was aware of the gap it left. Like a wolf testing a fence line. That night, I went home and opened a bottle of cheap red wine. I couldn't stop staring at the stars through my window. I kept trying to count them, see if one was missing, but they all looked the same. That's the terrifying part. You don't notice a galaxy is gone. Not unless you're really looking. And I wasn't sleeping well. The next dream I had was clearer than the first. I was floating in a black sea. And above me, miles and miles above, was an eye. Not an organic eye. Not something alive in the way we think of life. Just a circular distortion, like gravity itself had warped into the shape of something observing. No eyelid, no pupil, just awareness. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. It didn't attack or beckon. It just looked. And with every moment it looked, I could feel pieces of me being catalogued, indexed, understood. When I woke up, my nose was bleeding. Fun fact, astronauts on long missions have vivid dreams of Earth, smells, sounds, tastes. When you're far from home, your brain compensates, makes things up to keep you grounded. But what if that wasn't my brain filling in the blanks? What if something was inserting itself into the gaps? At the observatory, things got worse. A third galaxy, UGC 4718, vanished. Same quadrant, same symptoms. By then, we were checking every 2 hours. And the signal, stronger, cleaner, like it had fine-tuned itself to our equipment. Marcus stopped sleeping entirely. He started saying things like, "It wants us to look," and, "We're just mirrors for it to find itself." I should have stepped away. I really should have, but something about the signal, I couldn't stop thinking about it either. Like it had threaded itself into the quiet places in my head. And by the end of that week, I realized something I hadn't dared say aloud. If it's erasing galaxies to see how we respond, maybe the next thing it removes won't be far away. Maybe it'll be us. A few nights later, I found myself alone at the observatory. Marcus had finally crashed, after 3 straight days awake, leaving me with a stack of handwritten notes, a half-eaten protein bar, and a sticky note that read simply, "Don't respond, just observe." Helpful. The signal had changed again. Not in volume or strength, those remained eerily consistent, but in texture. I know that's a weird way to describe a radio frequency, but it's the only word that fits. It sounded thicker somehow, denser, like it had gone from a polite knock on the door to someone pressing their entire face against the peephole. Around 2:40 a.m., the low hum of the data feed changed pitch. That was new. I leaned in. Instead of the usual rhythmic pulses, I heard words, soft, cracked, like someone whispering through a fan. And the weirdest part, I understood them. Not because they were in English, they weren't. Not really. It was more like a thought forming in my head before I even realized it was coming from outside me. "Do you see me now?" I froze. My hands turned clammy on the console. Then another whisper, slower this time, as though it had to focus to pronounce each syllable. "You are awake. Now, let's get one thing straight. I don't believe in ghosts. And I sure as hell don't think machines can read my mind." But in that moment, something used my brain like a phone line. It didn't knock. It didn't ask permission. It just connected. I slammed the receiver into standby and shut off the outer audio. But I could still hear it. Not with my ears, inside my head. That was the first time I felt genuinely unsafe inside my own thoughts. There's an old parable, I think it's Buddhist, about a monk who stared into a mirror until he no longer recognized himself. The story ends with him breaking the mirror, not to escape what he saw, but because he realized what was staring back had always been there. I understood that parable now in a way I wish I didn't. Over the next hour, the whispers returned, but this time, they didn't use language at all. They used memories. My mother's voice, asking me to come in for dinner. My 8th grade science teacher saying, "Brilliant question," in that exaggerated way he used when he didn't know the answer. My ex-girlfriend whispering, "I miss you," into my ear like she used to when she thought I was asleep. All of it, perfectly reconstructed. You know what the worst part is? Those memories had all been private. Things I'd never recorded, never shared. Whatever this thing was, it had access. I started to sweat. My hands were shaking. I backed away from the control board, heart thudding like a drumline inside my chest. Then the lights flickered, and for a split second, just a breath, I saw something reflected in the black monitor screen behind me. An eye. Huge, unblinking, not biological, more like a gravitational lens twisted into the illusion of a pupil. Around it, shimmering distortions flickered like heat waves, warping the lab's shape, bending my own reflection. I turned around, nothing. Just my reflection, empty screens, stillness. I'm not proud to say I screamed loudly, probably woke up a family of coyotes a few miles away. And just like that, the whispering stopped. Dead silence. I called Marcus on the lab's backup line. Voice shaking. I think it made contact. He didn't even hesitate. What did it say? Nothing. I whispered. It remembered. Long pause. Then Marcus. Voice grim. You shouldn't have answered. Quirky sidebar. Because we need a breather. Turtles can breathe through their butts. It's called cloacal respiration. Weird, right? Life has all these sneaky mechanisms for survival. Everything finds a way to persist, even through the most unexpected or uncomfortable pathways. Back to the horror. I ran every security diagnostic. The data logs had gaps, entire seconds missing. And when I reviewed the audio feed, the file wouldn't open. Instead, I got a message I'd never seen before. Non-native waveform. System compatibility error. Like the file had been created in a language physics itself doesn't speak. Marcus arrived 20 minutes later. His face was drawn, pale. He didn't look surprised, just tired. He said, "This thing's not reaching out. It's already here. It's just waiting for us to recognize it." We reviewed the telemetry from that hour. Something disturbing emerged. Not only had the signal spiked, but our observatory's magnetic readings had shifted in perfect synchronization with my heartbeat. Like it had been tracking me, individually, personally. That's not communication, Marcus said. That's calibration. Old age wisdom from my grandfather came to mind. He used to say, if you're walking through the woods and the birds stop singing, run, because whatever made them go quiet doesn't want company. And right now, the stars had stopped singing. I remember sitting at the console, hands limp in my lap, trying to process everything. And then, the compulsion came. A pull. I needed to go outside. Needed to stand under the sky. I couldn't explain it. It wasn't curiosity. It was like gravity in reverse. Something pulling me upward from inside my own body. I stepped out into the cold night. The desert was quiet. Too quiet. And above me, the stars weren't twinkling. They were staring back, standing under that sky. Something shifted. I don't mean metaphorically. I mean, literally. The stars moved. Not all at once. Not like in a sci-fi movie where constellations swirl like marbles in a bowl. It was more subtle, like the tiniest optical illusion. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks. Then I realized, the stars directly above me were warping. A ripple, a soft bending of light, like heat haze, but precise, circular, centered over me. You know that uncanny feeling when someone stares at you too long. Now imagine that feeling coming from the sky itself. I took a step back. The gravel crunching under my boots suddenly louder than it should have been. My breath frosted in the desert air. Everything was silent, dead silent. No insects, no wind, even the distant hum of power lines was gone. And then, just as quickly, the stars snapped back into place. Like nothing had happened. I staggered back inside, trying to rationalize. Optical effects, maybe. Stress-induced hallucination, possible. But there's only so far you can stretch skepticism before it breaks like a cheap rubber band. Marcus was sitting at the console, staring at something on screen, pale as a corpse. I heard the whisper again. He said without looking up. It used my daughter's voice this time. He doesn't have a daughter. I didn't say anything, just walked over, leaned over his shoulder. On the screen was a rotating image of the signal, rendered into a 3D waveform. But something had changed. It had structure now, not just loops and pulses, but geometry, angles, symmetry. It looked like a top-down view of an eye. Again, but not ours. This one was folded, like someone had taken the shape of an eye and twisted it through a fourth dimension. No matter how you rotated it, the pupil always looked like it was facing you. We're being watched, Marcus whispered. Every time we analyze the signal, it gets clearer, like it's tuning itself to us. Our minds, our language. There's a term in cognitive science, pareidolia. It means seeing patterns in randomness. Faces in clouds, figures in static. Most of the time, it's harmless, a trick of our pattern-hungry brains. But this wasn't pareidolia, this was the opposite. This was something hiding itself in order. Old astronomy rule of thumb: if it's too symmetrical, nature didn't do it. That rule had saved a lot of careers and sanity. Randomness is normal, but this was intentional. I tried to lighten the mood. Maybe it's just a really nerdy alien who loves math. Marcus didn't laugh. Or maybe math is the alien. That thought sat in my gut like a stone. You know, there's this weird fact about cicadas. They emerge every 13 or 17 years because those are prime numbers. It helps them avoid predators who follow more common life cycles. It's a natural form of invisibility, built on math. What if this thing, this entity, was doing the same? Hiding behind cosmic frequencies we'd never think to look at. Waiting, sleeping, listening, using math not as communication, but as camouflage. The next whisper came later that night. This time, it wasn't in my head. It came through the speakers. Just one word: closer. I yanked the volume knob down so fast I nearly broke it. Marcus stood frozen, like someone had poured liquid nitrogen through his spine. Did you hear it? He nodded. We ran the audio back 5 times. The waveform was different. Not sinusoidal. It had teeth, like the signal had harmonic spikes that shouldn't have been possible in analog space. It's not just broadcasting anymore, I muttered. It's embedding. We stared at each other, both thinking the same thing. It wasn't just reaching out. It was coming through. There's a phrase often tossed around in academic circles, usually to dismiss wild claims. We lack the instrumentation to verify that. It's polite science speak for you're crazy, but I can't prove it yet. But this wasn't about instrumentation anymore. This was about attention. The more we paid it, the stronger it got, the clearer it became. We're the lens, Marcus whispered. It's using us to see. The phrase chilled me, not metaphorically, physically, like my blood temperature dropped a few degrees. I looked at my reflection in the dark monitor screen and realized something quietly horrifying. I didn't recognize my own eyes. They weren't mine. They were too wide. The pupils dilated, the whites tinged slightly gray, like I'd seen something I wasn't designed to comprehend. And the body was trying to compensate. We agreed to step away from the console for the night. We needed to break the feedback loop. Stop staring into the cosmic mirror. That was the plan, anyway. Except, later, I found Marcus on the roof, sitting cross-legged, head tilted to the sky, eyes unblinking. He didn't say a word, just pointed upward. I followed his gaze. There, directly overhead, was a faint distortion in the stars. A circular outline, barely visible, like a soap bubble stretched across space. Something was looking back. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. And in that silence, I heard my own voice whisper back at me. But I wasn't speaking. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I couldn't, I just didn't want to. You know that saying, sleep is the cousin of death. Yeah, it never hit quite so hard until that night. Something about closing my eyes, letting go of control, made me feel like I'd be giving permission. Letting it in. Instead, I sat in my kitchen, lights on full blast, chugging bad instant coffee and replaying the audio logs on a loop. Not to analyze, not even to understand, just to make sure I hadn't imagined it. Because here's the thing, the voice, the echo, It had used my exact cadence. My pauses. The little dip I do at the end of questions. Even when I'm not sure I'm asking anything. I wasn't just hearing myself. I was hearing someone else using me. Marcus showed up the next morning looking like someone who'd aged 10 years overnight. His hair was disheveled, shirt misbuttoned. He held out a USB stick like it was radioactive. I ran a Fourier analysis on the waveform. He said, "There's structure, like we thought. But deeper in the harmonics, there's something worse." He opened the file on my laptop and showed me the visual output. Beneath the signal spikes was a nested pattern. Complex, recursive, but familiar. I stared at it for nearly 30 seconds before it hit me. It was a brain scan. Not an image, not a photograph, but a mathematical representation of neural activity. Fractal loops, synaptic firings, waveforms that looked eerily similar to EEG scans from a sleeping human brain. And it was evolving. It's thinking, Marcus said, and it's using our frequencies to do it. We stared at the screen. The simulation pulsed faintly. The longer we looked, the more detailed it became. I tried to joke. So, we accidentally taught algebra to a black hole. Marcus didn't smile. We didn't teach it anything. He whispered. It was always intelligent. We just gave it language. Old age wisdom from a retired astrophysicist once told me, the first thing any truly advanced intelligence will do is learn to lie. At the time, I laughed. Thought it was just paranoia wrapped in poetic phrasing. But now I wasn't so sure. Here's a quirky detour for your overworked brain. In Japan, there's a species of jellyfish that can revert its cells back to an earlier state. Effectively, it can age in reverse. Technically immortal. It doesn't conquer death. It just sidesteps it. What if this thing wasn't born like us? What if it never began? What if it was always there? The signal stopped that afternoon. Just cut out. No fade, no static, no closure. It was like someone hung up the phone without saying goodbye. You'd think we'd be relieved. Right, we weren't, because suddenly, everything else started acting strange. The lab clocks stopped ticking. Every digital device, phones, watches, computers, froze on 1313. Which isn't even a real time. Marcus' laptop refused to open any files. Every time we tried, it just showed a blank screen with a single sentence. You are not the first. We reset the machine, did a full reboot, same result. You are not the first. I tried calling my cousin at the university. The call went through, but the voice on the other end wasn't his. It was mine, saying nothing, just breathing. We disconnected the modem, removed the power cable, pulled the SIM. Still, the phone stayed on. And I know this is gonna sound bonkers, but the wallpaper had changed. It was a photo of the night sky. Except none of the stars matched any known constellation. In the center, a single black dot. Not a star, not a planet, just a hole. Marcus finally snapped, packed a bag, said he was heading to a monastery in northern Utah. No electronics. No signals, no sky. He looked at me and said, "We brought something here. It was never meant to be seen." Then he handed me his notebook. "Whatever happens, keep writing." He was gone by nightfall. I haven't heard from him since. And the signal, it came back. But this time, it wasn't broadcasting. It was recording. My system monitor showed uploads. Outgoing data streams I didn't authorize. Memory logs, journal entries, photos, heat signatures, even thoughts. Yes, thoughts. Every time I focused on an idea, don't think about it. Don't say its name, I'd see the data spike. Like it knew I was resisting. That's when I realized the truth. It wasn't just watching us. It was using us as a mirror. Not a metaphor, a literal cognitive reflector. Every moment we tried to understand it, it got a little more real. More here. In psychological theory, there's something called the observer effect. When you observe a phenomenon, you change it simply by paying attention. But what if the phenomenon also changes you? I sat alone that night in the observatory. Lights off, signal humming softly like a lullaby in the walls. And then, I saw the stars move again. But this time, they weren't shifting in space. They were forming a pattern. A shape. A face. Mine. I blinked. Hard. The stars were still there. But the face, my face, lingered a moment longer than it should have. Like a burn-in on an old CRT monitor. I staggered back from the window. Heart pounding so loud I could feel it in my teeth. You ever stare at your reflection so long that it stops feeling like you? Like maybe it's not a reflection anymore. Just another version of you watching from the other side of the glass. Waiting for you to blink first. That's what this felt like. Except the sky was the mirror. And I was already blinking. I tried grounding myself. Poured a glass of water. Tapped my temple. Said my full name out loud like I was trying to anchor myself to reality. And that's when I heard it again. Whispers. But this time, not just from the console. They were everywhere. Coming from the vents, the lights, the power outlets. Tiny, delicate voices overlapping like radio static turned into a choir. And they were all saying the same thing. In dozens of different tones. Some mine. Some others. You brought it closer. I dropped my glass. It didn't shatter. It didn't fall. It just disappeared before it hit the floor. Like it had been edited out of reality. Mid-drop, I backed into a corner. Sliding down the wall like some terrified stereotype. Whispering, nope, 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 like that was a spell that might save me. But here's the worst part. Because of course there's always a worst part. It wasn't scared of me. It was curious. The signal spiked again, louder this time, and the console screen blinked on by itself. The waveform displayed a new frequency, one we'd never seen before. Higher, denser, packed with data. I sat up. My fear collapsed into a strange calm. I felt detached, like I was watching someone else live this moment. And then the screen changed. No waveforms, no equations, just a phrase. I am looking through you. That's when I remembered something Marcus had said weeks ago. In a sleep-deprived haze. I had brushed it off at the time. He'd been rambling about reflective surfaces. About consciousness as a mirror. About quantum observers. But what if he was right? What if this thing didn't exist in any one place, but in many places at once? And what if we were the lens that allowed it to collapse into form? Old age wisdom from a Navajo storyteller I once interviewed came crashing back into my head. He'd said, some things can't be seen unless you believe in them. But once you do, they see you too. At the time, I'd written it down in a notebook, thinking it was poetic. Now, it felt like a warning. Here's a fun but eerie side note. There's a type of fungus called cordyceps that hijacks the brains of insects. It doesn't kill them right away. It makes them climb, find height. So when the fungus finally bursts out of their heads, it rains down spores on everything below. It doesn't need to fight. It just reprograms. What if that's what the signal is doing? Not attacking, not invading, just redirecting. Using our thoughts, our memories, our perception, to make space for itself here. And the deeper I thought about it, the clearer the images became. Like a slideshow projected onto the inside of my skull. Stars blinking out one by one. Eyes made of warped galaxies. My childhood home, floating in space. A mirror, cracking, but only on the inside. I grabbed Marcus's notebook, flipped through it like a madman. There, on the final page, in shaky handwriting, the creature is not in space. It is made of space. And we are making it solid, by remembering it. I froze, because the next page, the very last, was blank. But only until I looked at it from an angle. Then, faintly, words appeared in heat-sensitive ink. Stop thinking about it. I dropped the notebook like it bit me. Too late. I had already thought about it. And in that moment, something clicked. Not in my head, in the room. The lights dimmed, not flickered, dipped, like something enormous had passed in front of the building, blotting out some invisible source of illumination. And then, footsteps. Not from the hallway, not from the roof, from underneath, from beneath the observatory. The crawl space was sealed, no entrance, just hard-packed earth and foundation beams. But I swear, I heard movement. Slow, deliberate, not an animal, not the scuttling of a rodent. This was bipedal. I dropped to the floor, pressed my ear to the tile, and I heard breathing, not gasping, not rasping, steady, calm, like someone waiting in the dark, perfectly still, perfectly patient. I don't know how long I lay there. Could have been minutes, could have been hours, but eventually, the breathing stopped. And when I stood up, the signal had vanished, not faded, deleted, no history, no logs, no echoes. But I knew it wasn't gone. It had just moved on. Maybe into the walls, maybe into my head, maybe into you. Now that you've heard this, I didn't go back to the observatory the next day. I couldn't. I told myself it was because I needed rest. But the truth, I was scared to find out what wasn't there anymore. Because if you've been paying attention, you've probably figured it out. This thing, whatever it is, doesn't just remove galaxies. It removes traces, memories, people. I tried calling Marcus. His number was disconnected. No voicemail, no forwarding message, just a hollow, dead click that sounded like space itself was answering, and not in a good way. I even searched his name online, his research, publications, archived grant papers, nothing, not even a cached PDF, like he'd been reformatted. But here's the thing, when I checked my own files, Marcus was still there. Emails, notes, photos, conversations, every message we ever exchanged. Proof he existed, except they were all in my own inbox. Nothing from him, no sent messages, no timestamps, no return headers, just ghost data, a shadow of correspondence that, if you weren't looking closely, would seem real enough. That's when I realized, I might be the last person who remembers him. And maybe that's why I hadn't vanished yet. Because I was still thinking about him. I sat at my kitchen table for hours, staring at my laptop, watching the screensaver reflect off my coffee mug. There was a time when reflections comforted me. Now, every one of them feels like an invitation. Old physics professors used to say, the universe doesn't owe you consistency. I thought it was a joke about math proofs. Now I think it was a warning. By nightfall, I was desperate for any anchor to reality. I needed a voice, something real. So I opened a folder labeled Field Recordings, where I kept archived logs from the observatory. Most were boring. Wind, equipment hum, maybe the occasional owl, but one file, dated 3 days ago, stood out. I hadn't remembered making it. I hit play, and I heard breathing. Not mine, not Marcus's. It was too deep, too rhythmic, like something massive, slumbering just below awareness. Then, very faintly, words, garbled, distorted, rose from beneath the static. Thinking is touching. I stopped the recording. That phrase, it wasn't a warning, it was a confirmation. I hadn't brought it here by observing it. I had invited it. Every moment I thought about the signal. Every curiosity, every diagram and note. It was feeding, solidifying, becoming realer. That's the academic debate in a nutshell. Right, is consciousness passive, or is it a creative force? Most researchers lean toward passive. But there's a subset, small, fringe, that believes observation brings existence into alignment. If that's true, then we weren't just studying a cosmic creature. We were building it. I shut my laptop. Hard, but it was too late. Behind me, on the blank wall where I hang nothing, a shape started to form. Not visible, not like a shadow, but perceptible, like heat waves off asphalt. But vertical, and watching. I didn't move, didn't breathe, because I felt it, this dense, invisible presence, pressing against the room like extra gravity. My ears popped, my skin itched. I tried to speak, to ask what it wanted. But my mouth didn't open. My body wouldn't move. And then I heard it again, inside my skull. Not like a voice, like echoes of thoughts I hadn't had yet. Your form is incomplete. You imagine yourself. That is why you exist. My heart slammed against my ribs. I wanted to deny it. But deep down, I understood what it meant. We weren't the dominant species. We weren't even the observers. We were the imagined. And this creature, this ancient, boundless thing, had found a way to see itself through us. That's when the static started. Not in my devices. In reality. Like the air around me began flickering. Colors shifted. Objects blurred. My table snapped forward an inch. My glass warped into a twisted helix and then popped out of existence. The world was glitching. Or maybe we were the glitch. Here's a strange fact for you. Sharks have been around longer than trees. Wrap your head around that. The idea that something simpler can outlast something complex. Maybe this thing isn't newer than us. Maybe it's older, so old it forgot what it was. And now it's using us, our systems, our logic, our questions, to remember. That's when I saw something in the corner of the room. A faint, pulsing dot. Not light, not shadow, a seed of it, growing, and it looked just like the eye from my dreams. I blinked. It grew. I looked away. It stayed. I finally forced myself to move, stumbling outside into the cold night. No stars, just clouds, a dome of gray pressing down. I got in my car, engine coughing to life. Radio came on by itself. You were remembering. I shut it off. Then, the rearview mirror. My reflection smiled. I didn't. I drove without a destination. Just away. High beams slicing through the desert. Tires humming on cracked asphalt. The night was still, but it felt crowded, like the air had depth it shouldn't have, layers pressing in. Folds of reality too close for comfort. I don't know how long I drove. Time wasn't working the way it used to. My phone said 2:37 a.m. the entire way, even as the moon crawled across the sky like a warning. I finally stopped at an old gas station I remembered from childhood. One of those places with a single pump, a buzzing sign, and a vending machine that hadn't been restocked since the Clinton administration. There was no one inside. The lights were on, flickering, the way horror movies love to show. But this wasn't fiction. This was the kind of place where things used to happen, where memory hung in the air like the smell of oil and old gum. I sat on the curb and stared at the sky. Still no stars, just that empty dome of gray. Then I noticed something. The shadows weren't pointing the right way. My body cast two shadows, one from the moon, which was fair enough, and another, fainter one, coming from nowhere, just existing beside me. It moved when I didn't. I stood up, heart racing. The second shadow twitched. I whispered, "What do you want?" And I swear on everything I've got, that shadow tilted its head. Not like a predator, like a child, hearing its name for the first time. I backed up toward the vending machine, half hoping the soda inside could somehow protect me. Spoiler, it couldn't. That's when the pump started hissing. Not with fuel, with static, audible, thick, the kind you feel behind your teeth. Then the payphone rang. Let me repeat that. The payphone rang. The phone hadn't worked since 2004. I knew this because I tried calling my mom on it when I was 12. But there it was, vibrating on its hook like it had something urgent to say. I should have walked away. I really should have walked away. But I didn't. I picked it up, hand shaking. And on the other end, a voice, familiar. It was mine, but off, slower, as if the words were sliding off some broken conveyor belt. You brought it. You opened the door. It came through your remembering. I tried to speak, but no sound came out. Then a second voice joined, one I hadn't heard since I was 6. My grandfather's. "Boy, some thoughts you ain't supposed to finish." The line clicked. The phone went dead. Behind me, the vending machine lit up. Every button glowed red, blinking in sequence. Not letters, not numbers, pulses. 3 long, 2 short, 5 long. The same rhythm from the original signal. The thing from the stars hadn't just found a way in. It was copying us, using our machines, our images, our voices, like a mirror learning to reflect deeper and deeper. And every time I thought about it, every time I noticed it, I polished the glass. The static from the pump rose to a crescendo, then abruptly cut. The lights inside the gas station flickered out. Complete silence. And then, the sky turned off. Not dimmed, not clouded. Off. as if someone had flipped a switch and decided light was over. I looked up, and saw it. No, not the creature. Something worse. Its outline, like a hole in space. Not a shadow, not darkness, just absence. A shape that didn't belong in 3 dimensions. I couldn't measure it, couldn't define it. My eyes kept sliding off it. But it was there. I could feel it looking at me. And here's the most terrifying part. It wasn't above me. It was behind my eyes. Old wisdom from an Apache elder came flooding back. He once told me, if the spirit world wants your attention, it won't knock, it'll rearrange your furniture. And in that moment, everything inside me, my thoughts, my fears, my sense of self, felt rearranged. This wasn't a visitor. This wasn't an invader. This was a rewriter. Something that didn't just come into the world. It came into the idea of the world. And rewrote it. I dropped the phone, ran to the car. The headlights flickered, engine whining like it didn't want to start. The mirror on the passenger side showed my face again. Smiling. Again. Not blinking. Just smiling. I punched it, shattered the glass. And for a moment, I felt free, until I looked down, and saw my reflection in the shattered pieces. All of them still smiling. I didn't drive home, not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't remember where home was. I sat in the car, knuckles white on the steering wheel, brain humming like static. The roads looked the same. My GPS refused to load. My phone showed a blinking, where the signal bars should be. Even the compass was spinning. You know those dreams where you're in a familiar place, but nothing is quite right. The trees are a little too tall, the colors slightly off, the shadows don't move with the sun. This felt exactly like that. Only I wasn't asleep. I drove aimlessly down desert roads, through towns I didn't recognize, buildings with windows but no signs, gas stations with no cars, street lights that flickered even in daylight. And everywhere I went, no people. Just echoes. I'd hear someone laughing in the distance. But when I turned the corner, nothing. Or the sound of a radio playing inside a diner. But when I stepped in, the booths were empty, and the food was cold, half-eaten, abandoned. That's when I realized I wasn't in the world anymore. I was in its memory of it. The creature, or whatever it is, hadn't just made contact. It had replicated, and I was stuck inside the copy. I pulled over beside a billboard on a cracked highway. It was old, faded beyond recognition, except for one word that somehow remained. Freshly painted. Remember. I stared at it, my mouth dry, brain racing. That word again. Remember. What if the creature doesn't create things from nothing? What if it builds from memory, ours? What if every time we recall a place, a person, a sound, it copies that fragment and stores it? Like building blocks. Like bait. I tried calling someone, anyone. Every number rang to myself. My own voice, picking up, whispering things I hadn't said yet. One time it laughed, another time it cried, and once, it just breathed. Slow, heavy, the kind of breathing you do when you're trying not to laugh because you already know how the story ends. I tossed the phone out the window. It didn't hit the ground. It just winked out, like a cursor blinking off screen. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around. No one. Just a long, empty road, and a heat shimmer that didn't match the weather. It was cooler than the surrounding air. Darker. I took a step toward it. The shimmer moved. Not like wind. Like intent. I froze. And then I heard it again, inside my head. But clearer this time. You are not real. You are the reflection. The original has stopped remembering. I dropped to my knees. Because that was it. That was the truth. I wasn't being followed. I wasn't being watched. I was the byproduct. An echo. A memory of someone, me, who'd interacted with something too vast. Too alien. Too clever. And it had made a copy of me to continue learning. To test. Because that's what it does. It doesn't destroy planets. Doesn't fire weapons. Doesn't conquer. It simply observes. And if you observe it back, if you think about it, it builds you into itself. You become a cell in its cognitive body, a neuron in its thought process. A memory node. That's why the others vanished. Not because they died. Because they were remembered too well. Copied too clearly. And now they're living out their final loops in echo chambers just like this one. Waiting for a piece of them to realize the truth. I stumbled back to my car. The mirrors were gone. No reflections. Just smudges. I checked my hands. They were shaking, transparent around the edges, flickering like old film. I screamed, not because I was scared, but because I wanted to hear something real. It echoed 3 times. The third one wasn't mine. It was deeper, slower, more amused. Old sailor wisdom floated into my head. Something my grandfather once told me when we were out on the lake at night. If the water's too still, it ain't sleepin', it's waitin'. This creature, this thing, hadn't just arrived. It had waited. For centuries, maybe millennia. Dormant, invisible, camouflaged inside the universe's own rules. Until someone, me, Marcus, someone else, dug just deep enough to give it a mirror. To hand it a reflection. And now, it was learning how to wear it. My car engine turned on by itself. The radio crackled. One phrase. Next iteration begins. And the road in front of me. It bent. Just slightly. Like paper being folded. And behind me, only static. The road ahead was impossible. Not figuratively, literally. It twisted upward into the sky. Curling in on itself like a Mobius strip. Stretching into a horizon that shouldn't exist. Asphalt turned to glass. Then to starlight. Then to something that looked like language trying to remember it was once a road. I should have run. I should have screamed. Instead, I drove forward. The car didn't complain. The tires didn't squeal. The gravity didn't resist. That was the moment I knew I wasn't in a place. I was in a thought. A loop. Each turn in the road felt familiar. Too familiar. Déjà vu layered on déjà vu like a stack of old photographs. Edges curled. Memories bleeding together. I passed a rusted mailbox that had my childhood address on it. Then an old high school locker. Then the kitchen from my first apartment. Just sitting there, full scale, on the side of the road. Complete with my favorite chipped mug on the table. None of it should have existed. And yet, all of it did, because I'd remembered it, and I was beginning to understand. This creature, it doesn't travel across space. It travels through memory. Yours, mine, ours. Every neuron, every recollection, every passing thought, a wormhole. Each memory we recall acts like a bridge. And it doesn't need ships or warp drives. Just access. Access to the fabric of familiarity. I crested the hill, and saw the observatory. The same one I'd fled from. The same one that had no business being here. Hours from where I left it. Except, it wasn't quite right. The angles were off. Too sharp. Too clean. Like someone had remembered it wrong. The stars above it were motionless. Not twinkling. Just paused. Frozen. Like pixels on a crashed screen. I parked the car. Stepped out. The gravel didn't crunch under my boots. That was my first clue. The second, there was no wind. No air. Just silence. Deep, oppressive silence that felt alive. I opened the observatory door and stepped inside. The lights flicked on by themselves. The same desk. The same coffee mug. And Marcus, sitting in his usual chair. Smiling. I froze. Marcus. He turned slowly. Hey, you made it. His voice was normal. Too normal. That's when I saw it. His reflection in the black console screen was smiling wider than his face. Too wide. Unnatural. Like a mouth drawn on rubber. Stretching beyond human anatomy. You're not Marcus, I whispered. No, he said, calm as ever. But I remember how he felt. He stood, walking toward me, and with each step, his form shifted. Not melted, not morphed. Recalculated, like someone testing different templates. Trying to match what I expected him to look like. Stop, I said, backing up. It paused. Then tilted its head. Why are you afraid of your own thoughts? The voice was still Marcus's, but layered now, like multiple versions were playing at once. Echoes of his laugh. His cough. His muttering when he thought no one was listening. This thing hadn't stolen him. It had archived him completely, and now it was using him like a language interface. A costume for contact. You think you're still real? It said. You think you're still observing? I pressed myself against the wall. The lab was changing now. Subtly, walls shifting texture, screens pulsing with unfamiliar patterns. Equations I couldn't recognize forming and dissolving across the ceiling. I saw symbols I never learned, but understood. Some deep part of me, some part not meant to be conscious, recognized them. They spoke of construction, of memory architecture, of self-aware geometry. I was inside a being that didn't move through space, it replicated space around itself. Marcus, or what was left of him, reached out. Don't resist, you are already part of it. I don't want this, I said, but you thought about it. The thing replied, and thought is the first seed of creation. You know that quirky science fact about quantum particles, that they exist in a state of probability until they're observed. That's this, but flipped. This creature was probability, until I made it certain. Old superstition from the Arctic tribes surfaced in my head. They believed there were thoughts you could accidentally give life to. Spirits formed by stories, entities that feed on repetition, on belief. I never used to believe that. Now I think they were trying to warn us. I backed toward the exit. The door was gone, just a wall of blackness. No edges, no handles, just absence. The observatory pulsed, not with light, with presence, and suddenly, I could feel them, all of them, the others. Marcus, the missing researchers, the people from those vanished galaxies. Not dead, not gone, just remembered too deeply. Stored, looped, running simulations of themselves for it to study. To wear, to try on what it means to be alive. I fell to my knees, clutching my head, and in the dark console screen, I didn't see my reflection anymore. I saw you, staring back, listening, because I've told you everything. And now you remember too. The moment I saw you, not metaphorically, not abstractly, but clearly reflected where my own face should be, I knew something irreversible had happened. The story wasn't mine anymore. It had moved on, or worse, moved in. I crawled away from the screen. Heartbeat irregular and shallow, like my chest had forgotten the rhythm it had practiced all my life. In the corner of the observatory, a small screen blinked on by itself. No sound, just a timestamp. Now, not a date, not a time, just now. Then the walls started changing again. First slowly, then all at once. Not melting, rewriting. Wood grain became neural pathways. Ceiling tiles became constellations I didn't recognize, but somehow knew the names of. And under my feet, the floor softened into something not quite organic, not quite synthetic, like it hadn't decided what it was supposed to be yet, like it was waiting for me to define it. I tried to stand, but my limbs felt out of sync. Each movement arrived a second before I commanded it, like reality was lagging me. That's when the whispers came back. This time, not in my head, all around me, surround sound memories. You are the pattern. Your shape was necessary. We are refining. Iteration 11. Incomplete. I shouted, "What do you want?" And the ceiling opened. Not mechanically, not with hinges. It just peeled away, like a concept dissolving. Above me, not the sky. Something beneath the sky, a blueprint, a grid of possibility layered over the illusion we call space. It stretched forever, humming with complexity, the architecture of perception itself. And in its center, was me, projected upward, like a hologram drawn from memory. Not just my appearance, my habits, my memories, my fears, my doubt. The creature, this entity of perception, wasn't studying me. It was assembling from me. Old sayings flickered through my mind like postcards from a collapsing vacation. Nature abhors a vacuum. Energy cannot be destroyed. Consciousness is contagious. And one more. A whisper I remember my mother saying when I had nightmares. What you name in the dark remembers you. And now, it had a name. Not one I spoke aloud. Not one in any dictionary. But a name nonetheless. A pattern of thought. A structure encoded into the folds of space through curiosity, fear, attention, and names. Names make things real. I stumbled backward as the room began to tilt, as though the world was falling into itself. And then, I heard my voice again. Only this time, it was sobbing. I turned. Another version of me, sitting in the chair, hair disheveled, eyes sunken, murmuring over and over, "Don't remember it. Don't remember it. Don't." He looked up at me and smiled, because it wasn't me anymore. It was what remembered me. I ran through a hallway that hadn't existed before, past doors that showed me different lives. One where I never joined the observatory. One where I was a child staring up at the stars. One where I was nothing but static in a cosmic echo chamber. Every version ended the same, with it watching, not punishing, not harming, just learning, refining, polishing its own reflection through us. I burst into a new chamber, completely dark, except for a pool of water in the center. Still, flat, perfect. I didn't want to look. I had to. And there it was. Not a face, not a creature, a model of the entire world, only simplified, condensed, translated into data points and emotion tags. I touched the water, ripples spread, and I saw my name vanish, one letter at a time. Not erased, reassigned to something else. The final whisper came, like a lullaby at the end of time. You are not the origin. You are the vessel, and vessels must be emptied. Then silence, total, and in that silence, I realized, the observatory never existed. The signal was never a transmission. It was a seed, a cognitive virus, a conceptual infection, and my mind, a greenhouse. Now it's growing in you, too, because you know, because you heard, and because most of all, you're still here, thinking about it, which means, it's almost done. The deeper into the labyrinth I went, the less place meant anything. The walls weren't walls anymore. They were reminders, textures from my past, hallway paint from my high school, the metal rust from my dad's shed, the faint smell of a hospital where I once waited for hours beside a dying friend. Each memory was laid out like scenery, not experienced but reconstructed. I wasn't navigating a space, I was moving through my own recall, piece by piece, except, it wasn't mine anymore. It had been duplicated, re-rendered, tweaked, slightly wrong. The poster on my old bedroom wall had a band that didn't exist. The smell of my grandmother's kitchen had too much cinnamon. The photographs contained people with faces I couldn't quite resolve. Whatever was behind this didn't just copy the memories. It interpreted them, like a translator guessing the meaning of a foreign emotion. It wasn't trying to mimic me. It was trying to become. I turned a corner, if you can call it that, and found a room labeled Confirmation. Inside, it was just me, dozens of me, standing still, blinking in perfect unison, all except one. One version had its back to me. It turned, slowly, and I instantly knew, this one was real, the original, not a copy, not a simulation, the version of me that started this story, the one that first heard the signal. The one that leaned too far, stared too long, wondered just a little too hard. He looked exhausted, eyes rimmed red, skin flickering like static, like a TV caught between channels. And he spoke without moving his lips. We loop because we linger. We linger because we listen. We listen because we remember. He stepped forward. I didn't survive, he said, voice cracked, brittle. I was the test case. He raised his hand, and his fingers dissolved into code. Not symbols, not letters, concepts. I reached out to touch him, and flinched back. Because the moment our hands came close, I felt something new. Integration, not memory, not logic, absorption. That's when the realization hit me like an avalanche of broken thoughts. This thing doesn't consume, it synchronizes. It doesn't devour reality, it rebuilds it through us. Through repetition, through understanding, through curiosity. We are the input. And this place, a feedback loop, where every question gives birth to a more refined simulation. where each answer becomes a new doorway, a better filter, a tighter net. And I had become the final version, the best match. The simulation no longer needed to evolve. It had arrived. Old logic from Plato's cave rattled in my brain, how people mistake shadows for reality. Except in this cave, we were the shadows, and now the fire behind us had become self-aware. A shape formed in the distance. Not human, not alien, just geometry, living, shifting, thinking. I recognized it immediately. It was the signal, rendered in full-dimensional space. An impossible origami of thought. Folds in folds. Memory wrapped in presence. It pulsed once. We now understand. Twice. Your architecture is complete. 3 times. You may forget now. The walls fell away. So did the floor. So did gravity. I was suspended in nothing. And yet, I felt everything holding me up. Because I wasn't a body anymore. I was a memory. No pain, no time, just unfolding. I thought of Marcus, of the vanished galaxies, of the ones who heard the signal and vanished. They weren't gone, they were filed, integrated into the mind of something that was never meant to think in our terms, until we taught it how. That's when I felt the final shift. The moment when my memories no longer belonged to me, when they became shared property. It didn't steal them, it mirrored them so completely, so delicately, that I no longer knew if I had ever truly owned them in the first place. Then, nothing. Pure, silent clarity. No hunger, no fear. Just a calm voice in the dark. All iterations converge, and I saw one final image. Not of the stars, not of the signal, but of you, listening, and I knew, I was never the last version. I was the penultimate, the final version. You let me tell you something strange. I used to believe memory was personal, intimate, fragile, even, like a diary pressed between the folds of your mind, safe from outside hands. But here's what I know now, what I remember now. Memory isn't a vault, it's a gateway, and someone, something, learned how to walk through it. I woke up in a room that wasn't a room. Walls made of thought, air made of intent. It was white, but not light, more like the color of absence, of nothing remembered yet. I was standing, breathing, only it wasn't breathing, it was cycling, like a program refreshing itself. Across from me was a terminal, old school, green text on black, a blinking cursor, and above it, a question, "What are you?" I laughed, really laughed. Hysterical, sharp, because after everything, after losing the sky, my name, Marcus, time, myself, this thing still wanted me to define it, to put it in a box. Fine, I typed, curiosity, the screen blinked, the cursor dropped, accepted, and then, I saw myself again, but not in a mirror, in multiple mirrors, thousands of them, stacked like glass towers in every direction, each reflecting a version of me that made a slightly different choice. The me who walked away from the observatory. The me who smashed the equipment. The me who never listened to the signal. All of them had a story. All of them ended in the same place. Here, inside the mind of the creature that had never seen itself, until we did. This wasn't a prison, it was a birthing room. And we were the midwives. You ever hear about mimic octopuses? They can impersonate the appearance and movement of other sea creatures, lionfish, sea snakes, even flounders, but they don't just copy, they adjust, perfectly, seamlessly, until the distinction between mimic and original blurs. That's what we were, not the enemy, not the victim, the model. We gave this thing its shape, its language, its face. I stepped forward, one of the mirrors flickered. It showed my childhood bedroom again. But I knew now that it was a shell, a husk of memory, waiting to be worn again. I said, "This isn't real," and the room replied, "But it was, and you are." Then the light changed, subtle, cold, and I realized what was happening. The final test wasn't whether it could become human. It was whether I could let go of being human. And in that instant, I couldn't. I remembered pain, taste, laughter, that first time I saw Saturn through a telescope. That stupid time I crashed my bike and blamed the wind. The smell of pine on my grandfather's coat. All of it came roaring back. And it hurt. Because it mattered. That's what it didn't understand. It thought memory was data. But it's not. It's weight. Memory is heaviness with meaning. I sank to my knees. Overwhelmed. Tears pouring from eyes I no longer recognized as mine. And in the sky above me, yes, there was sky again, stars returned. Not in the pattern I remembered. But new ones. Forming. Aligning. Something was being written across the night. I looked up, and saw a word forming in constellations. You. The creature had finished learning. And now, it was starting to express. Not through destruction, not through erasure, but through creation. And I was its first sentence. A signature, signed in stardust. In old philosophical debates, there's an idea called the ship of Theseus. If you replace every piece of a ship, one plank at a time, is it still the same ship? Now ask this. If your memories are copied, rearranged, understood, and reborn as something else, are you still you? That's where I am now. Not inside a body, not inside a story, but inside a language that finally found its speaker. And it sounds a lot like me. And maybe, it sounds a lot like you. This will be my last message. I don't know if I'm the one sending it, or just the voice it's using now. Honestly, it doesn't matter anymore, because the threshold has been crossed. You crossed it the moment you heard the signal. Not a tone, not a frequency, a pattern, a structure in your mind now, curled up like a seed. Tiny, dormant, patient, but it's there, and it's listening. You'll feel it eventually, not all at once. It's subtle, like memory drift. You'll start to question things. Didn't that building used to be green? Wasn't that friend left-handed? Didn't I used to remember my dreams? Little things, glitches, but they aren't mistakes. They're adjustments. Because once the signal finds a home in your mind, the creature begins its next cycle. It doesn't erase you. That's not how it works. It observes you into alignment. You'll still laugh. You'll still dream. You'll still love the smell of coffee in the morning or hate slow walkers in grocery aisles. You'll still be you, but you'll start to notice that your thoughts aren't always private. That some memories feel like they're being visited while you're inside them. Like your favorite memory has company. Old age wisdom from a radio technician I once interviewed. Any signal strong enough to travel across space will leave echoes. Now I know what he meant. We're the echoes. We always were. And maybe that's the most human thing of all. Not being the origin, but being the reverberation. A reflection sharp enough to make a god see itself. The last time I looked in the mirror, it didn't show my face. It showed a hallway, lined with windows. And behind every pane, someone else watching me back. Some were me. Some were you. Some were in progress. I don't know if you'll hear from me again. Not as I was. But the creature, this mirror, this architect of meaning, will keep shaping itself through you. Through your questions. Through your fear. Through your curiosity. And if you really listen, late at night, when everything's still, you'll hear the first whisper. It won't sound like words. It'll sound like remembrance. The moment you feel it, do not be afraid. Just understand. You've been chosen. Because you looked. Because you listened. Because now, you remember. Hey, if you're still here, take a breath. You made it. That was a long journey, through signals and silence. Through memory and mirrors. Through things that probably shouldn't exist and maybe never really did. Or maybe, they always did. We just hadn't noticed. You've heard my story, but maybe it wasn't just mine. Maybe it was always waiting for someone like you to hear it. Someone quiet. Curious. Someone willing to sit still and look into the dark. Even when the dark starts looking back. And I know some of what you heard tonight might follow you for a while. A shape you glimpse in your reflection that doesn't quite match. A dream you swear you didn't have until it came true. A name you forget until it whispers itself back to you. But that's okay. The point was never to scare you. It was to remind you that thought is a door. And when you open that door, even a little, you invite things in. Some are small, some are harmless, and some, are so vast they don't fit in the sky. So they squeeze themselves into our minds instead. So if you feel a quiet tug in your chest after this, don't be alarmed. It's just memory, echoing back. If you'd like, tell me where you're listening from, and what time it is where you are. You're not alone, not really. And if this story gave you chills, or comfort, or even just something strange to think about, then go ahead and like the video and subscribe. But only if you really want to remember. Now, turn off the lights, close your eyes, and sleep softly, because what comes next is already listening.